Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Riley Peronto. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Edge Delta, and we're joined by Matt Miller. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Riley. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Matt Miller on the Solutions Architecture here at Edge Delta. Looking forward to the conversation and looking forward to the content.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a really exciting topic today. We've been working tirelessly on this new product, Edge Delta Free. So we're excited to show it off. We've got a few marketing slides to get through, and then we're going to show you a live demo of the platform, show it off firsthand. So really excited for today. Before we hop into it, a couple housekeeping things. So today's webinar will be recorded. So if you can't make it, or if you want to share this with a peer, you will receive a recording shortly after the event. If you have any questions for us throughout, there should be a Q&A function in your Zoom interface. So just drop questions in there and we'll do our best to answer them throughout. And if you want to just chat with your peers, chat with us, feel free to use chat as well. But before we dive into it, Matt, you were just at reInvent last week. How was it? Anything cool there?
Yeah, it was. It's always an experience. I mean, it's AWS, right? So the biggest of the tech shows, the largest crowds. I think someone told me that there were 60,000 attendees, and I believe it. We had a booth in the Venetian, and obviously that was quite a setup. The one thing that I'll say that I did notice, about reInvent this year is it seems like companies are continuing to double down and invest in the observability space. Vendors that were representing the observability space there seem to have the largest booths, the largest crowd. So definitely a lot of popularity there, and a lot of significant focus on observability practices coming out of AWS reInvent.
Definitely exciting space to be in. It's awesome. Well, great. Let's hop into the content for today. And before we hop into the actual story around our product, I wanted to provide a little bit of context around the problem we're solving. So as we were in the product development phase, we talked to a lot of different development teams and a lot of different DevOps teams of all different sizes and backgrounds. And a lot of what we were hearing, almost across the board, is that these companies were investing in Kubernetes. They were making this shift. And it was almost every single customer we talked to was moving towards Kubernetes. And that's great. And it provides a lot of benefits. It's obvious why companies are making this move. But there was one consideration, is that the way that you monitor your applications does need to change when you make this shift. And that's a big reason why we've invested so much into this Edge Delta Free Edition platform. So, and I should take a step back too. So the focus of Edge Delta Free is a truly automated, intelligent, low-touch application monitoring platform for Kubernetes. And so the main problem we're seeking to solve here is alleviating a lot of this uncertainty as you make this shift over to a Kubernetes-based environment. And really, the reason this needs to change is there's just a disconnect between the tools we've used for observability and to monitor our Kubernetes or our applications, and of course the underlying Kubernetes technology. So the first one is a challenge I think we've all run into, we've all heard endless amounts about, but Kubernetes apps generate a lot of data. There was a lot of data before, and then when you go from this one thing and you split it up into a bunch of different services, log data just explodes. It gets bigger and bigger, and it's uncontrollable. And of course, as we all know, the tools we use for monitoring and observability rely on a more high-cost storage target. So the more data you put into these platforms, the more expensive they get. And it's just creating this dynamic where teams are looking for ways to control the data that hits these platforms and control their costs, but they don't want to control it so much that it actually hurts visibility. So it's this trade-off they're working around, and I don't think any other company has really provided a really sustainable way to deal with this data challenge. The second disconnect here is this notion of, when you think about a Kubernetes cluster, this isn't just one flat thing you're monitoring. It's a multi-layered set of resources. Each layer has a different type of log data. If you want to, which you should want to monitor all this log data, you need to go in and manually set up logic at each layer. You need to set up monitors, and you have to know what things you want to look for in this data. And that's not just time consuming for DevOps teams and developers, but it requires you to know and kind of like prophesize up front, hey, these are the things that I want to look for and be notified about. And that's just an impossible task for a team that's got so many other things that they should be worrying about. And then the last thing that we were seeing a lot when we talked to our customers and our prospective customers is that if you're using Kubernetes, it's likely you're also practicing continuous delivery. And if you're practicing continuous delivery, you're updating your services and your software multiple times a day. And the platforms that we use for observability are not necessarily these like set and forget platforms. You have to maintain the things that you build within these platforms. Maybe you release a new service and it breaks a regular expression you had built in your observability platform. And it's just these things that like, that sounds like one small, like one-off thing, but it's a recurring tax on your team that they have to keep going back and maintaining these things and fixing them. And it really takes a lot of time away from teams. I'll pause there, Matt. Is there anything that I didn't touch on or anything that you want to add on top of that?
No, I think you really highlighted a couple key points there, and obviously the idea of not having automation mixed with constant change and constant reorganization can be certainly a big chasm, a big disconnect when it comes to an observability practice. So definitely, I agree with you there.
Awesome. So that like brings us to our next point here, and is why is Edge Delta solving these challenges? Why are we focused on this? If you're familiar with Edge Delta on this webinar, you likely know us because of our place in the observability pipeline market. And really what makes those pipelines unique and really sets us apart from our peers in the space is that we automatically analyze your log data as we collect it, as it's created at the source. And if you think about that for a minute, so like in order for these analytics to add value in a pipeline scenario, they've got to be highly automated. They've got to be very low touch. You can't be going back and reviewing these as you're trying to support these real-time use cases. They kind of need to just run in the background. And as we talk to our customers, many of them found just great standalone value in the analytics. In addition to the routing of these analytics to other streaming destinations, they found standalone value in just the analytics themselves. So what do I mean by that? Like, let's break it down a little bit further. So we have one customer that's in the gaming space, and they use Edge Delta as an observability pipeline into an open source observability log management platform. And the platform is kind of raw. It's not the easiest to use. It's got a complex querying language, and their developers just have a hard time working with this platform. So they bought Edge Delta for our streaming capabilities, our data optimization capabilities, and they came to found these really rich analytics that were actually significantly easier for their developers to engage with in the streaming destination themselves. So this team uses Edge Delta as almost a abstraction layer, like an interface on top of their existing platform to provide a better developer experience so that their team doesn't have to go through this complex experience of monitoring their applications. Another example I have here is really talking about the automated insights that Edge Delta has always provided. So we have another customer that supports an AI platform with Edge Delta, and they stream data to a more enterprise observability platform. And this team, obviously, in order to be notified when things were irregular, when things that they needed to pay attention to, they needed to manually build monitors and logic within their platform. And the team was already stretched thin. It's not a huge DevOps team. And they not only didn't have time to build out all these monitors, but they didn't know everything that they should be looking for and everything that they should be notified about. So they bought Edge Delta as a way to control the data that hit this platform. And then when they turned it on, they said, like, holy cow, this is catching things that I didn't even know was happening in my environment. So these are just two examples, again, of like providing a better experience for the user of these tools. And on top of that, providing a way for them to be notified and to proactively identify things that they should be paying attention to without having to put in the time or the work to derive that or extract it themselves. So and like just to put a cherry on top of that last point is like when we were getting this feedback from customers and made it clear that there's demand for this additional use case of Kubernetes application monitoring. And we really have worked hard to build a complete feature set around it so that teams can fulfill this use case. Speaking of that feature set, when I think of the platform that we've released, there's really 4 main buckets of features that are really important and really add this value to customers. So the first bucket of feature is these intelligent log analytics. So earlier I talked about the notion that when you think of a Kubernetes cluster, it's it's a layers of resources, and you have to manually go in and derive any sort of analytics. You need to build them at each layer. What we do is we proactively notify you when there's things that you should be paying attention to. We make it really consumable to understand your log data, and we deliver that at each layer without you having to go in and really set those things yourself. So it's truly, we're trying to build this kind of like set and forget, get full coverage of your Kubernetes environment without having to manually go in and do things. As a kind of a complement to that, we have a lot of really great and rich visualizations, which I could go on about. I think when Matt gets into the demo in a minute here, I think a picture is worth 1,000 words there, and I'm not going to try to describe these really great visualizations. But the thing I do want to describe here is that these update with each deployment along with the analytics. So as you release new software, as you deploy new code, your observability platform adapts and it catches up with these changes so you can stay ahead of the software you're releasing, and you don't have to continually go back and update dashboards and fix regex or anything like that in your platform. We all just kind of take care of that for you. This third thing here is our object storage-based backend plus search. So whenever we collect log data for 100% of your logs, we will route it to our Amazon S3 bucket in the free edition. From within Edge Delta, you can search on that data. And what this creates is a dynamic where you're no longer dependent on a really expensive storage target, and you can have a more sustainable and more cost-effective way to get coverage for all your log data and give your teams the visibility they need without necessarily worrying about this becoming prohibitively expensive in the long run. And then lastly, I talked a little bit about this with that AI platform example a minute ago, but we provide automatic anomaly detection and alerting, and we proactively will look for deviations from the norm, and we'll let you know when they happen. And we deliver really high quality alerts that can save your team a lot of time, and also make sure that they're paying attention to the most important things in their environment. So I'm going to hand it off to Matt here in a second, but just to like kind of end this portion of the session, we've talked through all these features. We've talked through why we built it. What are the 3 advantages that really you should realize when you're using Edge Delta? The first one is that you should expect to automate monitoring toil. So you should give time back to your developers and your DevOps engineers so that they can focus on what's core to their job and to their responsibilities. Second is you'll improve MTTI and alert integrity. So I just talked a minute ago about the anomaly detection. What's really great about our platform as well is that we are generating these alerts at the infrastructure level, so faster than if you were to centralize the data in an observability platform. And we also will deliver higher quality alerts than if you're building these like rules-based alerts that you would with another platform. We were just working with another fairly large company, and in production, they've improved alert integrity by 7% since deploying Edge Delta. And for a company of this scale, that's a huge amount and has saved their team a lot of time. And lastly, we'll help you reduce the noise in your log data. So we are taking what is once this overwhelming data set, this really noisy and not super actionable data set with a lot of excess, and we're extracting these signals and we're making it really consumable for your team to understand, here's what my log data is telling me, and here's what I should be paying attention to. So with that, Matt, I'm going to hand it off to you and we can dive into the demo itself. Yeah, go ahead. I'll stop sharing for you.
Absolutely. Some great points there, Riley. I think, one of the things I definitely want to stress that Riley brought up in a couple of those visualizations is ease of use. It's the idea that monitoring and observability no longer need to be difficult. They don't need to be full of toil, full of configuration. We really want to strive to make things easier. So when you have any given Kubernetes cluster and you have various workloads running in that cluster, let's get some insights on that data without any config. And that's really what the Edge Delta Free Edition looks to provide. As we look at this particular example here in this sandbox environment here, I have a lot of different types of services and requests that are being executed here. Riley mentioned the concepts of auto updating, right? Edge Delta is able to quickly and easily identify every workload in the cluster, regardless of whether that workload exists for a couple minutes or a couple days or is entirely persistent. We'll identify those components. We'll highlight each and every component based on what we know about it, meaning in this case, once again, the size of the circle in our visualization here is a quick representation as to the volume of log data that is being executed from any one of these given components. So we know exactly where my data is coming from. We also have some pretty neat color coding here that gives us some context as to whether there's any issues with that particular component. Are we seeing some deviations from normal? We'll talk about anomaly detection in a few moments here, but what I do want to stress once again, there's no configuration to this. Simply deploy the Edge Delta daemon set in your environment, and off we are to the races, auto discovering of all your components, and once again, automatically ingesting all of this data. Now, you'll notice for our search service here, obviously we have a nice little colored red circle, which is giving us the representation of something being out of normal in this environment. We'll dive into this example here. Certainly that looks like something interesting. This search service is experiencing something out of normal. We notice that with the quick visualizations that Riley mentioned, we see once again an anomaly with the search service specifically that occurred maybe about an hour or so ago. We also have some visualizations of pattern data. We'll talk about what pattern data is in a moment and how Edge Delta creates this information. But know that from our perspective, we can quickly and visually see that, hey, there's something going on with this search service, and have Edge Delta analyze this data for you with no regex, no SQL queries, no manual configuration of alerts. All of this is out of the box functionality. And if we want to dive into what this anomaly happens to be, let me understand exactly what's happening for my search service in this particular moment in time. Of course, Edge Delta will provide that value to you as well. And once again, I cannot stress this point enough. For any other solution on the marketplace today, this is simply set it and let Edge Delta learn what is normal for your environment and let you know when we recognize, of course, something out of normalcy, an anomaly compared to that normalized performance. You'll notice a couple details here that I think are incredibly interesting, namely some negative patterns that have been detected in the log data by the Edge Delta agents. We see how often these patterns or events are occurring. A couple of things that are, well, they look pretty catastrophic, some fatal level logs, of course, things like fail to process an HTTP request, maybe some key issues that are occurring here. These are all net new or log events that we've never seen before. Maybe they've been included by the team in application code or by the infrastructure, by Kubernetes. It is entirely and completely autonomous here. We discover these events as they occur, even for the first time, with no configuration, let you know exactly where they're happening, which service is actually impacted by this. So for a developer who may need to understand exactly what's happening in their particular service, we do have that capability, and we can quickly and easily analyze this data in context without the need to, once again, manually write SQL queries on this data. Why I think that is interesting is if I jump into the search level details here, our workload level view for exactly what's happening for our search service. I know exactly what's going on here because I can see not just that anomaly that we mentioned earlier, but a complete view of the entire service with that anomaly in context, meaning each and every log event automatically identified by Edge Delta, automatically separated from its peers. Of course, Riley mentioned that cold search on, in our case with Edge Delta Free, the S3 based backend. So we'll query your logs stored in that object and make it super simple to be able to understand, in this case, any of these errors that are occurring. I get the full context, my raw event data teams need to troubleshoot for any given service. Once again, we're looking at in the context of this search service here. So certainly from our understanding, all of this data is available to whoever needs it, the DevOps team, maybe the dev team or whoever's on call, whoever's responsible. I should also mention that, of course, anytime Edge Delta recognizes an anomaly, we take quick and immediate action. Maybe that's firing off a Slack notification or routing the proper team an email with the findings that we've identified, the anomalies that we've identified. But all this happens autonomously. And if you want to know what's actually happening underneath the hood, if we want to dive a little bit deeper and understand how does Edge Delta Free Edition actually enable this easy troubleshooting workflow, and what are we able to accomplish with, once again, no configuration, no routing of the data or manual setup of the data. I'll jump back and take a look at maybe the past couple of hours of information here. All of this information is going to be in real time, automatically captured by our Edge Delta agents deployed to the cluster directly. We talked about briefly what a patterns is. We showed in the anomaly view a couple identified patterns in this environment that were brand new. Of course, in our world, a pattern is our unique ability to identify each and every log event in the environment. For example, if I dive into one of these particular patterns, I'll see some context and some understanding. The Edge Delta agents automatically parse through and understand exactly what the structure of that log event looks like. We'll do things like identify static content. In this case, it might be a message like failed to process the HTTP request. There may be variable content as well, things like maybe user ID or trace information. Maybe there's some critical tracking, things like response time and others. All that data is automatically identified by Edge Delta. And certainly why this is important is typically in order for teams to identify this type of information, you would need to pre-configure a query or pre-configure a parsing rule to be able to extract this event type when compared to its peers. You would need to already know exactly what that event type looks like in order to gain value, in order to understand how many times it's occurring, whether it's a part of a larger issue or not. Why it's relevant, of course, to our conversation is today, as we've mentioned many times, there's no manual configuration here. I don't have to set up any of that complex config in order to be able to get the analysis of exactly what's happening in this environment for this particular pattern or event type. We understand exactly, once again, that it's brand new, how often it occurs, and what the total percentage of all the traffic that actually makes up. And of course, I think this is probably my favorite feature of the platform, if I have to be honest, is the capability of actually applying a sentiment analysis to every event, meaning we parse through that event, we assign a negative or neutral sentiment entirely from the content of that event itself. That is, of course, a customizable library, so you can have some control there. But in this case, you do see things like failed to process or failed completion or error, system invalid access key, right? Some examples of negative sentiment events, meaning negative connotation or net negative types of events that teams would typically see. When we see a significant clustering of these negative event types, as you can see from this particular example with some spikes over the last hour or so, a significant increase when compared to the normalcy for that particular environment. Of course, you'll see what's normal when it comes to negative events. And when we get this significant deviation, this significant change, of course, autonomously, Edge Delta is able to identify that, present the insights, once again, of where this data happened. We show that to you directly in our anomalies view, which we showed you just a moment ago. We'll dive back into that here, and you can see now in context, not just when the event happened, when the anomaly happened, where it happened in the environment, what components might have been impacted, but those specific patterns themselves that were impacting the service at that moment in time, those log events that are a part of this particular anomaly, to be able to troubleshoot, to be able to understand the application performance and to be able to use that data to very quickly find answers to the question, what's going on, in this case, with my search service or any service that happens to be experiencing issues during any given production workload. Once again, all of this happens in context of autonomous discovery, autonomous anomaly detection, zero configuration, and no need to, once again, manually set up or search on the data just to gain insights into any given Kubernetes workload. I know we've covered quite a bit here. I think it makes sense. Maybe we'll check to see in the chat if we have any questions, or if anyone would like to jump in with a question. We're always happy to answer those.
So one question we got, Matt, was you covered a lot of the operations and the day-to-day of like how I would engage with this platform, but the setup and the deployment, like what kind of work goes into the deployment process?
Absolutely, a great question. You'll notice here in this particular cluster, in this particular environment, just a couple nodes in the Kubernetes cluster. Edge Delta in our world is able to very quickly and easily deploy to any given Kubernetes environment. To show you how easy it is to actually do that, I'll give you a quick view into, once again, deploying Edge Delta, getting insights up and running. We've already mentioned many times that we don't require manual configuration of components in any given Kubernetes cluster. We don't require manual configuration of the agents. Riley mentioned earlier the auto updating nature of these agents. Well, how hard is it to actually get Edge Delta deployed in your environment and get all of the insights that we've mentioned today? Well, it's pretty simple. Really, it's 3 commands. If you're familiar with Helm, to be able to add the Edge Delta agent to your environment and deploy it in your cluster with ease. And from there, really, the agent takes care of the rest. All that analysis is done by those Edge Delta agents, whether you have 2 nodes in your cluster, 3 nodes in your cluster, or thousands of nodes in your cluster. There's no manual configuration or any advanced tweaking or tuning or setup in order to get the insights that we've talked about today.
Awesome. If there's no other questions, Matt, is there anything else in the demo that you wanted to show off, or should we close out with our slides here?
Yeah, I think that about wraps up our Edge Delta Free Edition kind of insight level details. Certainly, we're always here on standby to answer questions if anyone has them. But I think that kind of wraps up what we wanted to show you today from a technical perspective.
Awesome. If you wouldn't mind giving share back to me, I'll jump back to our slides here. Perfect.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we just went through the product demo. That's awesome. Really exciting stuff. One question we also frequently get is what's the difference between Edge Delta's tiers? So we now have 3 product tiers: our free, our professional, and our enterprise offering. The free edition, 0 cost, completely free, supports 10 gigabytes a day of log data and supports 10 nodes within your Kubernetes environment. And we retain the log data for 7 days. The main use case for this is going to be Kubernetes application monitoring, as I've covered. Professional is the same feature set, the same set of use cases. This scales up to 50 gigabytes a day, 50 nodes, and a 30-day retention. And we have very transparent pricing, which you can check out on our website. And lastly, our enterprise offering supports an additional use case of observability pipelines. And it supports unlimited ingest, unlimited nodes. You would work on pricing with the product expert that you're working with. So that's our free edition. The main focus of this product is really on log data today. The thing that we're actively working on and building into the platform is support for metrics, traces, and Kubernetes events. So look for this in the new year. We're really excited to add this additional functionality. So be on the lookout, and we'll be sure to notify you when it's ready. But that's all the slides we had today. With that, we can open it up again for Q&A if there's any other questions people had. So let me stop share here and take a look at our questions. Hold on one sec. All right. So it looks like we did get one question in here. How easy is it to upgrade from the free platform to the enterprise platform? And I can take that one, Matt. It's really easy. It's basically takes you talking to one of our product experts once you've started using the free, and we can very quickly get you switched over to enterprise. So it's a very seamless maturity plan, if you will. Second question here is, what use cases do you see gaining the most traction with customers? Matt, is that something you want to take?
Yeah, I guess I'll maybe in the context of Kubernetes, we see a lot of mesh or service focused architectures, which leads to a lot of chaos with traditional observability configuration. So I think that architecture from the Kubernetes services perspective has really led to some significant toil when it comes to traditionally monitoring or observing insights into those clusters and those workloads. So that's definitely, I think, probably the number one tech trend that we have seen recently, definitely.
Awesome. And then the last question here is, you touched on this a little bit, but with our alerting and our anomaly detection capability, how do you know when a log has like a negative sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beauty of Edge Delta is, you really don't have to know. We do it for you. So it's the idea of, once again, we will parse through your event. We'll look for negative connotation phrasing. We, of course, include what we think is going to be negative out of the box for you. Some examples might be things like, I don't know, system exception or error level, at the log, severe level for the log event, as a couple common examples. But those are typically used as an easy way to assign that negative sentiment with, once again, no manual config.
Awesome. It's a great summary. So that's all the questions we had. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to send out the recording of this webinar shortly after the event. So look for that in the coming days. And otherwise, we really appreciate you joining us today. Edge Delta Free can be deployed directly from our website. So just go to edgedelta.com. There's a big button on the homepage and you can get started with the platform. And we really appreciate you joining us today. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. But thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time.